Hey, welcome to the Pharmacy Residency Podcast, a member of the Pharmacy Podcast Network. I want to just first ask you to get on the email list. I am going to go over the residencyplanner.com calendar, and I send out not only the podcast episodes, but things that are timely to each of these 6 groups of things that happen. And so if you go to residencyplanner.com, it's just your first name, your email. I don't need anything else. I just want to make sure that you get the material. You can also subscribe to Tony PharmD on YouTube. You can also join the Facebook group, which is Residency Help. Hopefully I'll be able to change it to Residency Planner. But let's talk about the calendar. And there are 6 main sections. We'll talk about the primary focus, and then we'll talk about how the results of parts of those primary focuses affect these sections. So in January, February, right now, I am supporting those who are looking for residency interviews. I have the Teachable course, residency.teachable.com/p/interview, where I have 3 hours of support on how to gain points in the interview, because what you're really trying to get is a ranking. You're not going to get a job. You're just trying to get a ranking that is above the line. And it's just like that TV show, The Amazing Race, where if you don't go above the line, you unfortunately will be eliminated from contention for that area. And that's kind of a really tough thing, because all you're doing is gathering rankings. You're not actually getting any job offers until you get the one job offer, which is relatively secure, in March. And so if you're asking, well, when do I apply for jobs? Well, you apply for jobs now. You should have applied really in fall if you're not sure about your residency chances, or if you're bottom 50. When I say bottom 50, so I'm talking about the 50% of the pharmacy schools that match at a rate lower than the top half. It's really the 80-20 rule, where the top 20% match to 80% of the residencies. And it's even more extreme when you talk about the top 10 and the bottom 10. So the top 10 schools will match 500 students of the 4,000 that match. That's top 10 schools, not top 10%. The bottom 10 schools will match 50, or 1/10 of that. So when do I send in job applications? That's the time to do it. In March and April, I will help with phase 2, and I really only help, I want to say, 2 or 3 dozen people, because I really want to focus on making sure we can get things as good as they can be, because phase 2 is so much more competitive, with about a 13% success rate than phase 1. And then May and June, that's time to prepare for the NABPLEX MPJE. You should have been really doing it the whole time, but that's when you really ramp that up. And you may be continuing to do job applications. The average pharmacy school will have 20 to 30% of their students at graduation, and that's the schools that show this at graduation. Some schools have 6 months out or 3 months out rather than at graduation, but at graduation, 1/5 to 1/3 of the pharmacy students in your class, depending on the quality of the school, will not have secured a position at graduation or on graduation day. And there's no reason to talk about it, because no matter what I say, you're not going to believe that you're going to be that person. So we won't talk about it until May, when you're like, oh, I'm that person. Now I'm going to need some help with that particular issue. Okay, July, August, that's going to be the first months of residency, and I talk a little bit about success there. And I'll talk a little bit to the P2s and the P3s about APPE selection. We'll start that process. September, October, CVs and LOIs for the real gunners. These are the ones that are going to be getting the matches at the academic medical centers, at the top sites, the UNCs, the Mayos, Cedars-Sinai, the Houston group, that PGY1, PGY2, admin. I know Iowa's a very competitive one. Maryland's competitive. Hopkins, really, half of theirs go to their own, so it's extremely difficult to get that. But I know staffing is something that makes people kind of reconsider that one. The 12-2 is really tough, which is what I believe that is. So a 12-2 means you work 12 days in a row, you're off for 2. You'll see it put as you work every other weekend. But what you really need to get in your head is that I'm going to work 12 days in a row and have 2 days off for a year. CV, LOI, early commit. That's in September, October, kind of getting those things perfect and deciding whether you're going to do it. Hopefully you've been able to get like a pediatric rotation if you're going to do PGY2 in peds, or you've got a critical care rotation and so forth. And then APPE selection. Let me talk real quick about that. When we're talking about something like chess, which has a very clear opening, it's fuzzy when you get to the middle game, but somewhere in there you get to the middle game, and then there is an end game, so there are 3 parts to it. Too many students think that ASHP mid-year is the beginning, or getting ready for that is the beginning. That is absolutely not true. It happens a couple months earlier. Nothing will affect your ability to succeed in an interview more than which APPEs you've had. Imagine that you are in the interview room, and let's say there are 3 other applicants. You have had two critical care rotations, one in the NICU, one in the PICU, and you've had a general hospital and ambulatory care and administrative. You match to 5 of their core residency rotations. Imagine someone else in the room has community, 2 electives, an off block, and a general hospital. There is no way that in their presentation and then in their case write-up that they are going to be able to compete with you. So getting the right APPEs before January is absolutely key for you to be able to articulate in your letter of intent, for you to be able to have an interview that makes sure that you are able to speak to those things. And then where should your off block be? Well, if you've got a number of acute care rotations, if that's your thing, in the fall, then the off block would be really when you're going to go for interviews. There is some time in December, so you don't necessarily need to have an off block in December, though it helps. But I really think that off block should be kept until the spring. And then November and December is my absolute busy season. Really, the second half of November, all of December, I helped around 160 students with letters of intent this year. To some extent, Stevie, that's not as much my thing. I've got some great people for you if you really want to spend a lot of money on resume and so forth, but you feel that investment is worth it. And then what's going on with the results on the right side? January and February, we are getting the results of Wave 1, but the problem is that you are not going to get a rejection from every site that you applied to. That is so frustrating. That means you were just hanging on to that hope. Okay, well, I didn't get a rejection from these 3 sites, so maybe there's a chance. But right now, on the 24th of January, we are at the point where, okay, well, you've got 1 week in January and maybe 1 week in February, but most of the interviews have already gone out. So you are probably one of the 1,500 applicants who unfortunately did not receive an interview, and that means that it is time to begin to work on your CV, one for job applications and then a different CV for phase 2, and then to look at your letter of intent. Maybe you didn't work with me. Maybe you tried to use one of the templates that's available on the internet and you just tweaked it a little bit and it was really generic, and your the sites that you applied to didn't take to that. Okay, so that's something you can email me about. Hey, I didn't get any interviews. Just tonythepharmacist@gmail.com. Then March, this is really where students make a mistake. They go all in to residency without backups, without having made job applications in January and February or even looking. And then they find themselves as part of the flood of applicants. So now we have 2,500 more applicants that have been rejected from the residency process. So in all, 4,000 students are in a position where they don't have residency. They might be one of the 200 that gets in phase 2, but you can do the quick math, 200 out of 4,000, that is not a lot of opportunities. So what do you do? Well, that's really when it's time to apply for the job right away, because there are going to be some people that don't apply then, thinking, okay, well, I'm just going to do phase 2, but really you got to get your job applications in there. And again, the average pharmacy school has a 20 to 30% at graduation, they will not have secured a position at that time. Now, they may have callbacks or things like that, but if you've not worked for a community chain or so forth, it may be very tough for you. And then wave 3, this is when you find out if you have phase 2 match. So there's about 1,000 to 1,100 re-applicants from waves 1 and 2 who earned an interview. About 3,000, I think, give it a shot, but only 1,000 of those get in, and then about 1/5 of those will match to a site in phase 2. And then December is it really should have been the beginning of the calendar. This is the results from early commit. So what am I trying to tell you? Well, I'm trying to tell you that right now, if you are not getting an interview, that reach out to me and we can kind of talk about what options you have at tonythepharmacist@gmail.com. And I get that you may have, maybe 3 or 4 sites that you applied to that haven't gotten back to you yet. But really, your first steps are to let me, send me your CV and letter of intent, and I can look at it. And it takes me about 15 seconds, and I can tell you whether or not that would garner an interview. And so, how can you spend so little time on it? Well, I've done this for a long time, and I've seen, many hundreds of these. But also, it's just really easy to do. When you are applying to residency, it's the first time you're doing it. And in your past, you have handed in papers for a grade. And you've handed in papers and they've been accepted and they've been handed back to you. Well, here we're in a competition, which is very different. So I'm just looking at it and saying, okay, is this a top 20% LOI? Is it a top 20% CV? And I'm not just talking about the formatting. I'm talking about the words and the way that you articulate your match and all of those things. And I can very easily see if it's top 20 or not. And once I do that, then I can say, okay, well, these would be the next steps if you're thinking about phase 2. Wave 2 is when I really get the emails. Obviously, 2,500 people getting over it. And really, that there is no time for all of those, steps of denial, acceptance, anger, all of that stuff. But the grief process is real, and I assure you there will be anger. There is anger that there is an 82.7% acceptance rates to pharmacy schools. There is an anger that you spent, $250,000 on something, and you felt that, based on where you were, you should earn a residency, and you didn't. The average indebtedness, and I understand that payments will be held off till September, which is kind of nice. They would have been held off for graduates anyway till November, but that what you thought would happen did not happen, and now you're looking back, just like Steve Jobs said, you can only connect the dots looking backwards, and you can clearly see that you chose this pharmacy school over that pharmacy school based on location. At that pharmacy school, you would have had an 80% chance to match. At this pharmacy school, maybe you only had a 20 or 30% chance. And those are, you can't beat yourself up over that. It's done. There's nothing to do about that now. What there is to do now is to figure out, okay, well, what do I want to do? Do I want to give phase 2 a shot? Do I want to start my job applications? Do I want to start that? And so again, I'm not going to judge you. I'm just going to tell you this is what you've got. This is your situation, and this is my recommendation. But when you get to wave 3 and that April and there's no phase 2 match, now you're in a position where you've got 4,000 or 3,800 now applicants who are also trying to find jobs with you. And I get the expectation was, all right, well, I took out all these loans. It was an investment, and I'm sure it was articulated to you in that way, and that my investment will not be paying off in May, June, July, and that it's a great disappointment. Your investment may pay off later, as it did for me. My investment took a lot longer, but I didn't put in as much. So I only paid $4,000 a year for tuition for 4 years. And this wasn't in the 60s. This was in the late 90s. And I know that you've paid many multiples of that. So that, when I made, $65,000 when I graduated, and, I paid $16,000 in tuition. So my return was, 4 times per year on that investment. And a return of 0 is tough. But what's really tough is, what do I tell my family that I'm graduating and I have no job? What are they going to think? And I tell you that they're not going to think anything. They're actually going to want to be supportive, and they're going to want to help you through this. So my recommendation is, just get in touch with me, TonyThePharmacist@gmail.com. Just say, look, this is my deal. Just push send. It sucks, whatever. And then I can at least give you a bit of direction as you move from there. Okay. All right. Well, I didn't want to get so negative, but no one at your school is going to be saying, okay, well, I'm sorry you're part of the 1,500 that didn't get an interview, or the 2,500. They're actually going to be mad at you because their percentage is lower for every person that applies for residency and doesn't get it. So again, give me contact me, and hopefully I can help you.